Hey everyone, Matt with Tractor Guy's Garage here tonight, and the old 88's under the knife again, so stay tuned, we'll tell you what's going on. So, when I bought this here, 1988 F-150, it had a couple problems when I bought it. I bought it non-running, as some of y'all may remember, and we did get it running and driving fairly easily, but it had a couple of problems as a result, and because it was non-running, it also had been sitting for a little while. The truck itself had a coolant leak that the previous owner believed to be a cracked timing cover. As it turned out, it was actually a bad thermostat housing, but it was leaking down on top of the timing cover, so it kind of looked like it had a bad timing cover. And it was only until I started to pull it apart that I realized the timing cover itself wasn't leaking. It was actually the thermostat gasket itself and the thermostat housing. I ended up actually having on the old 302 sitting over there a parts motor that came out of blue that had the correct timing cover and everything on it, and I was able to pull that off and use it on this truck. But as a result, it sat for about 2 years, not running, not driving, and we got it running and driving pretty well, and it seemed like it was going to be good to go. However, now that we've got it on the road, and I've actually got it titled and tagged and insured and all that, and have actually been trying to drive it some, a few problems have crept up. And the one that has led us to where we are tonight is it's got a problem about if you take it for a drive more than about half an hour or so of it running continuously, if you shut it off and like come back, like let it to cool off for a bit and then restart it, it doesn't have this problem nearly as bad. It still does a little bit, but it's not quite so bad. What it'll do is you'll be driving it, and then all of a sudden the truck will progressively, as it goes on, start to lose power. It'll start to buck and kind of pop and backfire out the exhaust, and it just kind of has a really weird, it has no acceleration and basically no power. And then as you continue to drive it, it'll get worse and worse and worse to where the truck will barely run and barely move on its own. It'll barely even idle, and if you continue to go, it will eventually die out. But if you shut it off, let it sit for a minute, fire it up, it'll run again for a little while, and then it'll have the issue again. But then if you let it sit for even a little longer still, you let it kind of cool off, as it were, the truck suddenly starts running pretty good again, and you've got another half hour or so of driving left till it does it again, or till what is going wrong, I believe, happens. Not 100% sure. These old OBD1 trucks, which for those of you that don't know, these trucks all are still computer controlled, but they are what predated OBD2. These use something called OBD1, which is a very much more rudimentary and simplified computer control system that came out before OBD1 did, or came up before OBD2 did, hence why this is called OBD1, or back what Ford would call it was EEC5. There's also some earlier EECs, but the EEC5 is what this truck has, and there's really not a lot of diagnostics you can do. You can't really monitor things like fuel pressure with a scan tool. You can't monitor engine temperature or a whole bunch of other stuff. There's just no way to check it. Basically, all you can do is, I think actually like engine temperature and some of these you can, because that does feed into the computer, but a lot of this stuff really, all it can do is check if relays are functioning correctly and if the relay circuit is good, or if there is some kind of a fault. And we have been getting on this truck a couple of faults that I've taken care of. One of them was a coolant temp sensor. I also had a good used one of those on a motor. I went ahead and threw that on there, and that seemed to have helped a little bit, but again, it didn't solve the problem. But where we're at tonight is, I believe it has a bad low pressure fuel pump, I think. These trucks are kind of weird. A lot of these trucks had, the original era had mechanical fuel pumps, or a mechanical fuel pump on the motor, and then it just pulled off of both tanks with a switching valve, or if it only had one tank, it just pulled off the one tank. But in this era, when they started running electric fuel pumps, initially, like your more modern stuff, and actually even the more modern 90s trucks, they had a in-tank high-pressure fuel pump that just directly fed the motor. And they had basically just a sock and then the pump, and then it ran a fuel line right up to the motor. These do not have that. These trucks have, in the gas tank, a low-pressure fuel pump, basically a lift pump, that then goes, if on a twin-tank truck, goes to a switching valve. Then from the switching valve, it goes to a high-pressure fuel pump on the frame rail, and then it goes up to the motor. So you have one fuel pump, a filter, high pressure fuel pump, another filter to the motor. So if you're counting, that means you have 2 fuel pumps per tank, or if you have a 3, you'll have 3 if you have a double tank like what I have here. You'll have a low pressure in each tank, the switching valve, and then the pump. So in a fuel system, in that case, that gives us potentially 5 areas where we could have a problem or a restriction. We could have a plugged high pressure fuel filter, a plugged low pressure fuel filter, a bad lift pump in either tank, or a bad high pressure pump. Well, the rear tank doesn't work. It hasn't worked since I bought the truck, and the previous owner said that it had basically never worked, and he'd never tried to get it working. It only ever ran off the front tank. And from what it's doing, I'm going to guess that I can hear the front pump running, and I checked fuel flow initially, and it has pretty good flow. But initially, this truck doesn't have a problem running. It's only after you run it for a while, and I've never been able to check fuel pressure when it gets hot like this, because I just am always either out somewhere, or I've never had a chance to be able to check fuel pressure when it's doing it. So to kind of, since I don't have the fuel pressure, I don't really like running it around the way it is. So what I want to do is, since the rear tank already doesn't work and the lift pump is bad, I know for a fact in that tank, because when you switch it to the rear tank and unplug the high pressure pump, the lift pump should still run, and it does absolutely nothing. You turn the key and it's dead. No sound, no nothing. So that pump in the back tank here is 100% dead. I'm still going to double check wiring, but I'm pretty sure the pump itself is just bad. So what we're going to do, I happen to have a good used pump that came out of Blue here when I pulled the tank out to go to a diesel lift or a diesel sending unit. So I've got a good lift pump and sending unit that we're going to stick in this tank that's already a high pressure fuel pump, and it can just push fuel straight through, and I don't need the high pressure pump or any of that stuff. And we're going to see if I can get that pump working, see how the truck runs, and we're going to try a little test here. Try running it around on the front tank, see what that does, and when it starts to have a problem, we're going to see if switching it to the rear tank is going to actually suddenly make it start running better, in which case we know that it's something in that front tank, or that switching valve, or the high tank. Now, with that being said, as we go along here, we'll see if that does work, because if so, I may just delete the switching valve altogether, because when you go to the high pressure fuel pumps, you don't actually need a switching valve, because those have a check valve built into the bottom of them that will switch automatically when you supply power to one side or the other. It'll automatically keep fuel from running back into the other tank. So in theory, we don't actually even need a switching valve, so we'll see where it goes, and yeah, I don't know, we'll figure it out. But anywho, what I've been doing now, and the reason I didn't initially start recording, is I wanted to see how hard it was going to be to get this bed off. And as you can see, she's loose. I got all the bolts out. Actually, believe it or not, they all did come out for the most part. Front 2 and rear 2, both sets came out. However, I did have to take and weld a stub that I had onto the tops of each of these, because these just started spinning in the frame. A lot of them do it, and honestly anymore I don't even necessarily try. I'll put a bar on it and just see if it'll come loose without it, but I just take and weld a piece of bar on top of it, and then you can go from the other side and pull them out, and it'll just run around and hit the edge of here. It worked up at all of these, it worked, and I think it was only one of these that actually broke. But then these 2 center bolts, as you can see, well, the bed is no longer connected to them. You know, we kind of got the old weight reduction going on in here, and same thing there. So those have conveniently removed themselves. I'm honestly, you know, that's a feature in my mind. I also got the fuel filler necks both removed here. They're both unscrewed, and the clamps that hold them to the bedside are both removed. So this bed, also the wiring has been disconnected. This is 100% free to come off, and I've got the cherry picker out here. Yeah, the last time I pulled one of these beds is probably been about 4 or 5 years ago now. So we're gonna, I don't know, we're gonna figure something out. I think I might run some straps to each of the corners and then try to lift it. Fortunately, the bed does not weigh very much, especially with this added weight reduction here. This thing's basically performance carbon fiber at this point. So we're gonna see how this does and try to get the bed off. The goal for tonight is to see if the bed will come off, and we can get and look and see what we've actually got here and go from there, because from there we'll kind of decide what path we want to go on, and we'll pick back up when we're getting the bed off. All right, well, we're back. Get the bed off. Didn't go too terribly bad. I had to put a little bit of extra weight on the old back end of the gantry here, try to get it off. And last time I did this, I didn't really remember having to put that much weight on it, but well, as I was taking it off, I realized I had neglected to remove the aftermarket baling wire that had been installed on the old exhaust system here. So yeah, that might have been holding it up slightly. But good news, we got that removed and she came right off. So here, and I think this is probably, ooh, the camera's a little dirty. There we go. This is probably about all we'll do for tonight. I think this is a pretty good stopping point. I think everything is pretty well pulled off though, and now we can start to do a little bit of a cleanup and kind of assess where we're at. One of the things with this truck is the frame is, well, it's a little thin in a couple spots, and there was actually a place up here where the frame had actually cracked. You can see, you'll probably see it better tomorrow in the daylight. It actually cracked and broke right here, right at this cross member at one point, and it had this stiffener plate put in it that goes on the under. It's actually on the two sides. It goes up in here and it goes down, and it's actually completely welded. And while normally that would honestly probably cause more concern, it actually seems like the welds aren't too bad, and it seems relatively decent. And I think what we'll do while we have the bed off is come in here and hammer this down and put a plate across this here too, just to stiffen it up some more and kind of just make it as strong as we possibly can. But other than that, overall the initial impressions are pretty good. I don't see too much that's been really messed with or, you know, seriously screwed up. And the other good news is that it appears that the tanks are both in good condition. There's some flaky dirt and rust kind of over them all, but nothing too serious. We'll probably tomorrow we'll crack in these tanks, and specifically the back one here, and see what we're dealing with, give it a good wash, kind of see how this tank looks, because I do have potentially I could snag up a different tank, because the tank that's in that truck right now is actually going to come back out and get a 38-gallon tank put in it. And so worst case, if this tank turns out to be not salvageable, I'll actually just pull the tank back out of this truck and order up a 38-gallon tank for this one and then stick it in here. That was kind of my plan if this tank turned out to be beyond usability. But overall, it doesn't look too bad. It's a little flaky, but overall it doesn't look rotted really. I don't see too much that would make me think it's rotted, but also we'll get in the daylight here and we'll see what it looks like from there. But overall, it doesn't look too terribly bad. The other reason that I'm doing this is it's actually twofold. Number one is to obviously do the fuel tanks. The other one is, well, you see how there's a shock mount right here, and there's a lack of one right there. Well, yeah, she deleted off, and the shock's laying down there. So part of having this off will also give me good access to get that mount changed out and make a nice easy path to get that all put in. So we will see you in the morning when we come back and start making this look better and start figuring out where we're at. All right, well, it's the morning. Actually, it's afternoon now, but for you it was about half a second. But where we're at now, had a chance to pressure wash it. I came out earlier this morning, pressure washed it all, got it cleaned up, and let it dry. As you see, we've got a lovely gloomy day today, so it took a little while to get it to dry out, and we got some rain in there, so couldn't really do much outside because, you know, big truck's in the garage, so, you know, it has to stay inside. But anywho, where we're at now, the fuel tank we've done a little bit of work to. You see I got the filler out of it, and it's in the garage right now. Actually, I lied, it's sitting right here. The new one's in the garage. But yeah, this is what we pulled out of it, and well, I think we can definitely see the problem. There's supposed to be a bottom on that. That could be why this float didn't work. Also, these well, yeah, they're a little on the thin side. This is, you know, this one's about ready to just, you know, delete off of there. So this plug's trashed. Pretty much this whole sending it is trashed. This sock's trashed. I mean, it's really badly corroded. So that's pretty much just good for the old, you know. That was an amazing throw. Anyway, what we've been doing now is, as you see, I've siphoned out what little gas was left in there, and that just looks amazing. But down in the tank here, if the camera will pick it up here, we'll give it a clean the camera a little here. If you can see down in there, we're trying to just get all of that out of there as best as we can. At least, you know, as much as reasonably possible, and you can't really see too well in there. But it's not horrible. Most of it's located like right in this ring here, obviously right from that filler. Likely due to the fact that the float and all of the guts of this thing deteriorating likely resulted in this thing just dumping massive amounts of crap into the fuel lines. And so the fact that that's so badly deteriorated really makes me think that this tank is honestly probably not too badly damaged, or I'm hoping it's not too badly damaged, because the fuel pump is likely what was bad on it. Now the one thing I don't know is if this tank will hold fuel or not. So I've got a pump and a lock ring and all that, so we're going to put that in here, and then I'm going to take, since I have to figure out this tank anyway, I'm going to take the fuel from here, transfer it into this tank, fill this tank up, and we're going to see if this tank will hold fuel. Because if this one will hold fuel and will still work, obviously it's a little rusty, but I'm going to hope that this tank's going to hang in there. I mean, for what we're doing, I don't really want to put a different tank in it. Now, obviously, I do have the tank that's in that truck that, like I said, I could just take out, and because I'm going to put a bigger tank in that truck eventually anyway, so I could just use that tank, which is a new tank, but the ease of just reusing this tank, if possible, is what we're going to try to do first. So I'm going to go get this cleaned out a little more, and I'm going to also tell y'all a little trick here. So you might be asking yourself, how are you going to get all that out of there without shoving a rag or something down in there? And you can do that. That works. Now, what I'm going to try to do, and what I've had luck with in the past, is, here, if I spin you, what we're going to try to do, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not. Basically, what we're going to do is taking, when you need to siphon fuel out of a tank like this or out of an opening, you can sit there and suck on the hose and get it going like that. But it really doesn't work the best. And obviously you end up with gas in your mouth, and with gas that's who knows how old, I don't really want to be putting that in my mouth. And if you use this trick, you don't have to. So what you can do, you need some compressed air and a blowgun for this. Is the only thing. You can also, I know some guys say you can do it with shop vac. I personally wouldn't do that because I feel like there's a risk of something going wrong there and creating a fire or an explosion or something. So I just don't do that. If you do this, do it at your own risk. This I know is safe though, so I use this. And all you're going to do, pardon the wind noise by the way, is take the end of, you take whatever end you want to shove down in the tank, shove it down in the tank. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the end of your nozzle, and it helps if you cut this end at a slash, kind of like I have cut in there. You can't really see it very well, but if you cut a little bit of a slash in this nozzle, it'll help this work. And then what you're just going to do is you take your blowgun and you basically just go at 90 degrees, if not slightly down from that, basically, and then just like that, blowing the air across the end of this. And what that'll do is create a suction. And that suction, when you do this, if you give it a minute, it will suck fuel from this end up through the hose and out. And then once it starts, you can quick cap it with your finger and drop it down into your bucket or whatever you're putting it into. Now this works a little better if you've got more fuel in the tank. What I'm doing now, it kind of doesn't work the best just because there's not a lot to siphon anymore. But what we can also do while it's running, what I'll do is I will take the feed and I will take it, and all of these little pockets of rust and debris that you can see down in there, I will take and hover this over all those, and as it's siphoning the fuel out, it'll suck all that debris out with it. In theory, it'll remove some of it. That's actually part of what's in there, was I've already started doing that, and that's actually a lot better than it used to look already. So we're going to see how this works, and I'll bring you back once we're done.